Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video is part 14 in the Fangled fastback conversion Mustang series. Now I left off in the last video working on the roll bar for this car, and I want to finish that up in this video if I can. Now, as you know, I have been away for the last 2 or 3 weeks, and there were multiple reasons for that. One of them is my mom is ill and we're dealing with that situation. But also I had surgery on my hand. I don't know how well you can see there's a scar healing right there. I had to have trigger finger surgery on my right hand, so I was unable to do much as far as swinging a hammer or being aggressive with tools because it hurts. So I had to be careful with that. But I'm going to continue with the roll bar. Now the idea is, as I left off, I had the hoop in place and I had the driver's side strut piece go to the back of the car. I want to finish that on the passenger side, and I need to get the roof on the car. Now I've done all this test fitting prior to this to make sure the roof and the rain gutters all interact like they should, and I'm going to go over some more details with that as I progress through this part of the video, or this part of the build. The rain gutters, or drip rails, they are welded to the roof, and the roof of course is welded to the A-pillar and the quarter panel slash sail panel, however you want to label all that area there. Now in the past what I've done is I have taken a drill and I've drilled small holes in the bottom of the drip rail or rain gutter, and I've welded up through into those holes to attach the roof. I feel pretty confident with that, and I may do that again, but I also might consider using the spot welder tool that I have and see how that works. If there's enough room, I may use that as well just to see how it works. Otherwise, I want to show you something else that I'm doing that is coming to an end in the video series. Now before I do that, I want to just kind of show you, this is the 68 fastback. Of course I have it on my trailer jig, and I have moved a bunch of parts around. All of these parts here are for the fastback, right? This is all TCI, Willwood brakes, all kinds of components here. There's a set of headers, and of course that's the engine for the Fangled fastback. All of this stuff has been sitting here, or not here, it was sitting in my house garage waiting for the opportunity to start installing this stuff. So what I need to do is get my Mach 1 off of the lift and get it into what I consider my paint booth area. So we're going to walk back there, and I've been assembling pieces and parts together. Like this is all for the Cobra Jet. All of these pieces are going to go back with that car, and all of these boxes back here are also directly associated with the Fangled fastback. So there's a variety of pieces and parts. There's vintage air setup, there's some carpet, there's parts from CJ Pony parts, there is a frostbite radiator in here, all kinds of stuff. These are boxes these were the complete wheel houses that I bought in anticipation of using them, but I also had bought the 2-piece deal, and I felt better about using the 2-piece just as far as making things fit. So these are just sitting here for the moment. Also, there's an exhaust system over there, and there's the mufflers, and there's a dash pad there. These are doors for my 69 project. So with that in mind, I wanted to show you, I showed a video previously of a short video on the Cobra Jet. Now I've been putting things together, making sure everything was in the right place as best I could. I finished putting in the grill and attaching everything that is associated with the front of the car. Just little things that I wanted to get done before it leaves. Now this car will be headed back to Florida very soon, and I'm really excited about it, because it's been a long road, and I'll do a video on that whole process, but I just wanted to show you what I was doing. But this car needs to leave this space so that I can bring my Mach 1 into this space. So I'll do more on this later on, but I just want to give you an idea of what I'm working through. What I need to do at this point is take the roof back off of the Fangled fastback and start working on fitting the roll bar piece as I had done previously. So this is the side that I already put in, and I need to replicate that on this side, and then again work on fitting the roof. So what I wanted to do is try to match the opening that I had created on the driver's side. Even though it may be just slightly bigger than what I wanted it to be, it serves its purpose. So I was just trying to get some measurements here and figure out a way to try to replicate that. So at this point, I changed my idea as far as using a drill. On the other side, I drilled a primary hole, and then I used a nibbler to try to expand that hole. This time, I went with my more traditional, just drilling holes roughly to the shape of that I wanted, and then cutting it loose slightly with a ziz wheel and knocking out that center section, and then that gives me a better starting point. So I took the rotary file and I cleaned up the edges of the hole as well. And I take my time, even though I know the hole needs to be bigger. I'm trying to direct the hole where I need it to go. So again, using the broom handle to try to figure out where I needed it. And then I did get the nibbler out to take some of that material away and make it slightly larger. The nibbler is tough to use in those situations because the air hose ends up hitting so many things. And then I took some measurements to verify the length of the down tube. Using the 4.5-inch grinder, I just started cutting. I had kind of preset the angle based on the other tube. I had done a comparison of them side by side and drawn out some lines anyway. And once I verified a measurement, I just went ahead and cut that chunk off of the end of the tube. It already had the bird mouth on the other end, which I had to modify as well to make it fit better and get the distance that I wanted on the up and down of the tube based off of the floor pan. And here what I'm doing is the same thing I did on the other side. I drilled some primary holes into that mount plate that came with the rollbar kit, and then I stepped those holes up using the step drill. Again, that's a tool from Harbor Freight. I like using those. They're very handy and they work really well, surprisingly. Once I had that figured out, I wanted to double check the fitment of that plate. So I put it back in the car and I noticed that it was sticking up on the edges. So I put some marks on the sides that I wanted to bend, put it back in the vise, give it a few whacks with a hammer just to change those angles slightly and help it settle around that raised portion. Also, I found there was a little weld there that was put in from dynacorn, and I just knocked that down to help it sit down a bit more flush onto the drop-off panel. So, as I'm making these modifications and preparations, as I had done on the other side, I took the plate that came in the kit and I drilled holes in it so that I could weld through these onto the top location here. I know it's sheet metal, but it does add some strength to that. And then I also bent these sides down, as you saw earlier. The reason for that is this is elevated. And so I wanted to make less of a gap on the sides when this was in place. So with that there, and I'm pretty happy with it. I mean, there's still a gap on this edge, but it's not bad. I'm going to weld all this in, and then I can continue addressing the bar. I have it mostly fitted, but I didn't want to fight with this moving around, and so I'm going to weld it in and make it solid. And just for reference, I am using the Yes Welder DP200. Really like this machine, and let's get some welds in. Might turn the heat down just a little bit. I'm having to move pretty fast. Well, it appears my battery died on my camera, so I did finish welding this in. I don't know how much was filmed, but as you can see, I did with the four plug welds, and then I welded the perimeter of the plate itself. And this forward section I did not weld. There's a bit of a gap there, and that's because there's a recess, and there's no reason to fill that up with weld. This plate is not going anywhere. If it did, something's really wrong. So this is solid. I will fill that with some seam sealer just to keep any water or anything from getting in there if it were possible. I also have cut the bottom end of this down tube, and it is fitted in place. I have a little tack weld right there holding it. I have a decent gap around the tube, much like this side over here, very similar. And also I measured to the top of that tube from a couple different locations down below, and I matched that with the top of this tube. So now what I want to do is weld in this tube, and from there I can get back to working on the roof. I may even get this deck filler piece in. I don't know just yet. We'll see how it goes, but I'm going to get this stuff welded in and then move on. I really do love welding this kind of metal. As they say, that's not going anywhere. Yeah. I tried to relate this earlier. I'm not the ninja that I once was. Everything's welded in, and I will point out there was some like glue tape, something right here in the middle of this bar, because it was all held together with tape. I did clean that off, and I went over this with lacquer thinner, wiped it all down. I'll probably take a Scotch-Brite, go over it one more time, wipe it down one more time, and then just shoot some Rust-Oleum primer on it, because I don't know what color we're going to paint this yet, but I don't want it to just sit here and get surface rust, which is what it will do. So I'm going to just get some primer on it, at least, you know, from like here up, and then on the down tubes, at least to the seat panel. So get that addressed, and then I can work on getting the roof in place. All right, the roll bar is welded in, it's solid, and as you saw in the time lapse, I cleaned off the tape residue that was primarily at the top, and then I scuffed it with a Scotch-Brite, cleaned it again, and just sprayed that Rust-Oleum primer on it, and that's all I need to do at this point. I'm not worried about it rusting anymore, and it'll be fine. Now, I was looking at this crossbar. This is intended to go between this leg and this leg, and I'm not ready to put that in just yet. Part of that is I still have stuff to do inside this area, and I'd rather not have that bar in my way, and it just doesn't matter at this point. I will point out that the bird mouth is cut on both ends of this bar. I did try to put it in place, and with the distance between the two legs right now, this won't fit. So they initiate the cut, but they don't know exactly what you're going to end up with. And I mean, I could probably beat it into place, but I don't do that. So this will end up needing trim back a little on both ends to make it fit where I want it. And that'll come into play later on. Now, I set the roof back up because I wanted to show you something. As I was talking about the rain gutter, or drip rail, this is pretty narrow. And I was looking at the spot weld tool that I have. There's no way it's going to fit in there unless I custom make some tips and try to compress it, you know, inside of that gutter. So what I've done on other vehicles is I will drill holes underneath here through the rain gutter and then backfill those holes or back weld those holes. And that way it's clean up on top. I don't have to do any grinding or anything there, and I don't have to fight with getting the welder in there and that sort of thing. So I will make some holes here. They'll probably be a little smaller than normal. This, I don't know what size this drill bit is. Normally I do like a 5/16, kind of like these here, but obviously there's not enough room for that. So what I'll do is drill with this drill bit, and then if I need to, I'll step it up with a step drill, because you only have so much edge distance between the inside here and this drop off, so you can't do much anyway. Also, I have not welded this section in yet, and I didn't do that on purpose because I wanted to be able to manipulate this just in case I had problems getting the roof on. So once that is in place and I weld the edges and of course the overlaps at the flanges, I will also weld this in, and I did the same thing. I have holes drilled here. This section I don't know what I'm going to do exactly just yet. I could either try the spot weld tool, or I may weld it just on this edge and grind it smooth. The fact is, the rain gutter trim, you see this little notch right here, it stops. So this section here is just kind of in space. These hold the trim, but they can't make this turn with this flange sticking out. So what they do is they just cut it short, and then it's just left kind of hovering out here in space, which is fine. So this isn't that critical as far as having a weld right here, because it'll be hidden by the rain gutter. So now what I need to do is get the roof, take it back off, and prep those areas as I mentioned, and then we're ready to put the roof on and weld it up. I know that I've had this roof on and off this car many times, and that's all part of that process I use of test fitting. Here I am marking the locations that I'd marked on the underside and putting them on top of that rain gutter so that I can drill. I just felt like it would be easier to drill these from the top, and then I decided, you know what, I've got the roof off, why not just get inside the car and drill these out. So I drill these primary holes and make sure they're spaced, you know, the way I want them, and then I went back in with the step drill to step them up just a little bit. You don't need a lot of opening for these type of welds. I'm just trying to make it as solid as I can. I blow it out, get all the metal shavings out of there, make sure everything's clean, set the roof back up for the umpteenth time. But that's part of it. You know, to make these panels fit, you have to test fit everything multiple times. I end up trying to push this back into the gutter, and I remembered that I needed to lift the center of the roof slightly in the middle, and then it'll drop right in. So I did that, and then I start placing my clamps so I can get to the point of welding this thing back together. Okay, I have used up most of my clamps. These are very handy right here. You know, if you have this narrow trough, it's easy to slide that into that trough. Some of the vice grips I have actually ground down the ends so that they would slip into that as well. I put a big clamp here to try to make sure this is nice and flush against the side of the quarter. And of course all of the flanges are sandwiched down nice and tight. So everything's fitting really nice. Very happy with how it looks. Same thing here. These are very handy. And then I also just put a variety of clamps up front here. Now I want to show you some measurements you can take. This little radius right here, this corner, down to this corner, this inside of this curve, is 21.5 inches. I've measured that off of the original car, and it may be just a hair wider here in the middle, like 21 5/8. Not that big a deal, but just to let you know it's 21.5, and I'll show you that in a second. And then back here, if I remember correctly, this distance from this face down to here, I want to say it's 33.5 is what I have, and that's the same on both sides. So the thing is, you can't change the shape of the roof. You're not going to stretch it. You know, it's not going to go anywhere but where it's at. And the same way with the width. You can't change the width. So whenever you're building these, as I demonstrated previously, the shape of this opening, I had to adjust that inner piece because it was pushing the A-pillars apart. And you could see the roof fits exactly. So you want to make sure all of that lines up before you do any welding. So I'm at that point now where I'm ready to weld. And as I've demonstrated before, I am currently using this Yes welder DP200. Very nice welder, dual pulse. And you can set the parameters up here on the front. And I won't go through all that, but basically you can turn it on and you can change your parameters to the metal thickness and the wire and all that sort of thing. And I have changed my wire over to the 023 or 025, whatever it is. So I'm going to be using that because of these smaller holes for the rain gutter. So I'm going to get set up and get ready to weld. Okay, I thought I would show you this DP200 welder. As you can see, you have steel, argon setting, wire thickness, gauge thickness of metal, two-touch memory, and then you can tune, like here it has 130 amps. You can fine-tune that as you need, you know, for what you feel your welding is, you know, how it affects your welding or your style. So what I want to do is press this center button, and thickness right now is at 1/8 inch. I'm going to back that down to 14. I think I measured, well, let's go down to, actually I'm going to do it at 18 because the thickness of the cowl panel I measured was 18 gauge. So I'm going to set it at that, and then I'm going to come over here to wire diameter and go to 024. And what it'll do is it'll set these parameters. So you can see it dropped it down to 60 amps and the voltage. So there's other things you can do with this, but this is really simple if you're just initially setting up your machine and what you want it to do. So if I want to change these parameters, I can. I'm going to leave it where it's at. I'll start welding and see what it does and if I need to change anything, but pretty nice setup on this machine. Okay, I'm crawling through the trunk up on top of the transition panel and working within the back window. So let me trim off the end of this wire. And what I want to do is work from the center as much as I can out. Okay? You never start on one side and try to walk it across, because you could have a wave of metal. But in the middle, that should eliminate that. Alright, let's see what happens. That's nice. So nice. I have to say, that machine, that setting feels perfect for what I'm doing. The only thing that I have to get used to when I'm applying welds is the post wire flow, let's say. So when I'm squeezing the trigger, I want to pull away, and what happens is that wire continues to feed out. It'll end up being about 3/4 of an inch out there, and I don't need to do that. What I need to do is stay on top of the weld, stop, and then pull away, and then it leaves a shorter bit of wire sticking out, which I like better. See that? That's a little bit longer than I want it, but it'll work. In case you were wondering, that sound was the core support being unclamped and removed, because I can, and now I can just step right up to this without having to climb over anything. Okay, that's enough reaching. I continue welding the roof on the front section here, and I'll talk about this later, but I had a problem with the wire, and I don't know exactly what was going on, but I think it was probably user error for the most part. And I've gotten so used to using the 30 thousandths wire that I don't know that I'll ever need to go back to the 024 because it just doesn't seem to make much difference. I can adapt to whatever I'm using, and I have pretty good luck with the 30 thousandths wire. So I'm finishing up this weld here at the top of the A-pillar, and then I move on to the rain gutter itself. And I'm still using the 024 wire at this point, and it's doing exactly what I want it to do. It's welding, it's filling the holes, and it looks great. But as I progress, I know that when I get to the rear section, I start to have trouble with it, fighting the rollers or something. And the wire ends up squirrel caging up inside of the welding machine. Now, I've had this happen with other welding machines as well, so it's not the machine's problem. It's, again, I think user error. And so I end up swapping it out. You can see as I progress here, at some point it'll start to kind of act weird, and that's where I start looking at it like, what's going on? So I stop the process and I swap back over to the 30 thousandths wire and finish my welding. This section here, I did have these pre-drilled holes that I had in that bottom section of the rain gutter, and all I'm doing is checking to make sure that it's fitting pretty flush up against that flange that's sticking out from the quarter panel, and I'm happy with that. So I continue to do these welds, and I also have a screw up in the top section. You can't see it very well, but I had one screw holding it slightly above that inner clamp, and I don't show it, but I take that screw out and I weld that hole shut as well, making sure that all of these welds are filled in nice. And I'll come back later and grind those and smooth everything out, adjusting here with the hammer slightly, and then I use the hammer to hold the flange in and finish welding that area. This is where I move up to that upper hole that I was talking about. I weld that one, and then there's a screw right above it. I remove that, weld that hole shut, and then adjust the material here to make it fit flush. I do have a seam where I'd cut open the radius in the corner, because when I was putting this together initially, it did not want to flex. So I made that cut right where that I was tapping with the hammer, and then I come back and fill all that in, and I'll smooth that up later as well. Now, of course, this will be covered up by the stainless trim and where the gasket goes anyway, but I do want to make it solid and not have any problems with it later on. So I had a little problem with the 023 wire, and I don't know if it was the parameters that I set up, or if I was being just kind of a little too aggressive with it, but it was starting to create a squirrel cage inside the welding machine. And I tried to fix it a couple times, and I did get it working, and I think it's mostly because that wire is so small, and as I'm trying to feed it and force it, it's not able to burn it fast enough, so it's kicking back and causing it to squirrel cage up inside of the machine. So this last section that I did up here, I switched it back over to 30 thousandths, and I reset the parameters on the machine. And I don't know, honestly, if I really need to go back to the 023 or 024 or whatever, because I can weld pretty good with the 30 thousandths. Now, I also want to point this out. Part of the problem may be my fault. If I take this tip off, I had dropped this and broke this ceramic piece. Now, that kind of diverts the gases around, and I don't know if it's something that may also be causing a problem. It's not hurting the welds. The gases are still flowing correctly, and it's burning in nice, but it's something I did, and I'll pay the price for it. I'll have to go get another one of those ceramic pieces. Now, this section here, there's not much more I can do to flush this out. I can attempt to move the clamps around, try to squeeze this in a little bit more, because honestly the transition here, it's a little fat on the roof side versus this part of the quarter panel. So It's probably just the way they are. I mean, because you have to have this against the inner structure, and then the roof panel has to go against this. It's a sandwich, and there's really no other way to get around it. So you just gonna have to deal with it later on with filler and shaping it, which is normal. But see, I like the 30 thousandths wire. It just feels like it welds smoother. And nothing wrong with the 023 or 024 or 025, whatever it is. But I'm getting more used to this. Just feels nice and clean. Okay, I'll finish up the other side and the front area, and that'll be it, at least for the roof. No longer topless. So I know it's not the most exciting thing to see the welding take place. However, I feel it's pretty exciting to see the welding completed. I did all the welding on the rain gutter, drip rail, welded in this section here as I talked about previously. I did add a little bit of a weld right there, and of course all of this as well, and I'm very happy with it. You know, as you go through these projects, you reach milestones, and to me this is a pretty good milestone, getting this roof in place and knowing that it's soon going to be coming off of my jig. Now, what I want to do is finish up putting in the deck filler panel, primarily. I've been holding off on that, and if I take this clamp loose, this piece will come out, okay, and it has these flanges on the end here, and of course I have the holes that I've already drilled or punched. These I drilled actually because they're not much edge distance, and so those holes will weld directly to this flange, and then the corner pieces here, these holes will weld up against the quarter panel, and this section here I'm going to try to use my spot welder, you know, the electric spot weld tool. One thing I do need to finish is, you'll notice this is not attached yet, and then up here, I had somebody ask me about this earlier, that is not attached yet, and so these need to be addressed. You can see the movement there, and I may have to rebend the flange on this side, because when you look at these, you know, this is pretty well straight, and there's a little bit of play. You can push this around, but this one fits really nice up against the inside of that. And this one, if I pull it, you can see where it pulls this piece over. So I'll need to address that. I wish I would have maybe done that before, but I'll work around that. Just need to get it up and making contact with that curve, right? And you don't want to change the shape of the quarter panel because the deck lid does fit nice. We already know that. So I'll have to address that, get these welded in up here in these lower sections, and then I need to look at how I'm going to attach the inside, because that flange is actually kind of sandwiched between this drop-off piece for the side of the quarter and then this internal section right here. Now what I may end up having to do, I'll have to figure this out, I may drill some holes in here, and once this is up on top, come in from the bottom side and weld through to make that solid. And then the other side, because that is a short flange, there's no way to put a hole there. What I may end up doing is trying to come in from this side and welding that bottom edge to the inner piece, or to the deck filler panel. So you always want everything to be connected, you know, one way or another. You don't want something floating around. So I want to make sure all these pieces are connected to each other. So I'll play around with this a little bit. This, I don't know, I may just drill that off actually. It's got a couple of spot welds holding it. That may be the simplest option, is to just punch off those spot welds, raise this up, make it make contact without rebending it, and then weld it back on. Because that's all there is. It's just that little flange right there. So that might be the easiest. And if you look at this side, remarkably enough, this piece is sticking up above this piece. And over here, it's well below. And basically the same amount would take care of that gap. So there it is. I'll just drill that off, reset it, and weld it back on. I really hope that people seeing this will recognize that when these pieces are put together, they may not be in the right spot. I've talked about this before. One of the problems I have with the pre-built dynacorn bodies that you buy is the panels don't actually fit right, and people don't realize this. Now, they may have improved or changed some things over time, but I know from experience and people that I know who have bought the bodies, they have found that they end up taking things back apart in order to get the pieces to fit correctly. So in this situation, that tab was definitely not installed in the right location. Whether they have a jig for it, I don't know, or if they just kind of eyeball it and say, hey, this is close enough. So cutting it or taking it loose by drilling out those spot welds is the answer. I reshape things slightly as I progress through this and adjust accordingly to make it fit that curve on the quarter panel. And you can also see how easily this metal moves. When you don't have anything spot welded together, everything can move very easily. So it's critical that you get as many welds into these panels as you can and try to make sure everything just interlocks and is secured. Now I'm fitting the deck filler panel, and I want to make sure that everything interacts like it should and that it doesn't cause a problem later on. I always stress this. I test fit pieces and I try to get everything in place as much as I can before I do these little welds. Because if you welded that in and then you come back later and the deck filler is not fitting correctly, you're going to end up starting over or redoing some things. So I weld those pieces onto the strut panel there that holds the hinges, and then I move up to the bottom side where it's going to get welded to the quarter panel. And you know, these are different. The different cars, the fastbacks they're built differently than the coupes, and even by year, a lot of these designs change with time. So like the 69 is not set up like this. It's a different design as well. And I showed that in the Cobra Jet videos when I was putting all of that car together. So just information that is valuable, I like to share and let people know what you need to do to make these things work the way they should. I should also say that I test fitted the deck lid prior to doing this welding to make sure that the gap was the same from side to side between the quarter panels. Even though the deck filler gives you that space, I want to make sure. So it doesn't hurt to take a few minutes and refit panels as necessary to make sure everything is going to work. So I weld in the driver's side the same way I did on the passenger side. And once I'm done with that portion of it, I take the deck filler back out. And as I mentioned previously, I want to make some holes in that structure where the deck filler panel is sandwiched in between. So with that out of the way, I determined that I can drill some holes on that flange. And I probably could have addressed this earlier in the build, like when I was pre-fitting all of these panels. Had I realized that those holes needed to be there, I could have done that. I thought I would try this spot welder, and obviously it's not going to work. I would not reach where I wanted it to, and I just knew it was pointless to even try to make it work, so I gave up on that, and I moved on to drilling these holes as I had talked about. So I put 2 holes in that little piece of metal that's up against the flange on the quarter panel. And I'll point out that that flange on the quarter panel is relatively short. It's only like, I don't know, 1/4 inch, 3/8 of an inch. So there's not enough meat there to drill a hole all the way through both of those pieces without going very high on that opening. So I decided to just drill the holes, and they would actually go underneath that little piece that is in the quarter panel. And here I decided that it was time to address that little piece of metal that was from the quarter panel to the back seat area, as I showed earlier in the video. So I weld those together, and I do that on both sides, make sure it's good and solid and nothing's going to move. And once I get that addressed on both sides, then I will move on to piecing in or putting back in the deck filler panel. So this, it fits really nice. It's a well-made piece. I used a hammer here just to tap it in because it's a snug fit. And then I continue on with clamping everything down as I usually do, and making sure that it's in the exact location that I want. So I do some measuring. I want to make sure that nothing's changed, which I don't expect it to, but it doesn't hurt to address that. And then I go underneath and I weld those holes that I created so that now the deck filler piece will be attached to the inner structure that is part of the seat panel. Once I have those 2 pieces, or those welded in on both sides, I should say, I also change direction here in just a second. And I go to the outside and I weld that flange from the quarter panel to that inner piece as well. Now I'm looking through the gap that is up there at the top. I can just see through it, and I can see where I'm welding. So I want to make sure I've got some weld on that piece as well. I don't think it's going to make much difference, but as I emphasize, I want to make sure everything is attached to each piece. Now here on the top section of the deck filler panel, I had made these holes, and in hindsight I probably could have made those holes a little closer to the corner of the flange, or where it drops down. On the ends here, I noticed that the edge of the hole is not fully covering that inner piece. So I'm taking my time to attach it, which is good. It's going to stay there. But I'm also filling in these holes a little bit at a time so that everything is solid. Once I get that done, I move on and I finish out the passenger side. And of course I sped up the time lapse here because, it's just part of the process. But I want to show the work involved with making all of these pieces fit and work together. So the top half is done. And then, okay, the battery is saying I have 36 minutes left. And I want to use the pinch weld tool that I have. And I'm going to try it. I used it before on the other car. The thing is, this thing is really heavy. For being just a chunk, right? This is awkward. And of course the way this works Then you clamp this on and compress it, and then hit the little trigger. And I haven't used it since I did the other car, so we're going to find out. Squeeze this together, hit the trigger, and it may not even do anything because there's no bare metal. It's got that weld through primer, and I think that's going to be part of the problem. Yeah, it's not doing anything. So I'm probably going to have to do some prep work. I was really hoping that it would just do what it's supposed to do, but maybe not. I'll probably have to do that on the bottom side as well. And again, I'm hoping this works. Because if it doesn't, then the next step will be creating some holes that I'll have to drill through and make them work. So. Now, still not doing anything. Almost did something there. There you go. Man, it's again probably the weld through primer is not helping. So you can hear it do the thing though, like. Yeah. You know, and this is like the Harbor Freight version of this. And I'm grateful one of my followers actually got this for me, sent it to me. But it's still cumbersome. And I know a lot of people are saying, use it for this, use it for that, but let me tell you, I don't know what this weighs, but it's an awkward thing to handle. Come on. There it goes. Quite the workout. tell you. Wow. It's not helping that this hand is screwed up. This finger is not liking this at all. If I can do it with my other hand. Whew. Okay, I'm going to finish out this other side. My hand needs a break. Alright, I have the deck filler panel welded on. It fits very nice. Of course, I did all welds up on that top flange and spot welds on this bottom flange, and they appear to be holding okay. You can see the little burn marks in there. Now, I still need to push this back a little, weld that in. I'm not sure if I'm going to split this or not, because sometimes when you have an angle like that and you try to bend something, it kind of deflects weird. Initially, when I was looking at this, I thought, well, maybe when I was first putting this together, I thought maybe this would go behind this panel, but I've actually talked to somebody who has an original car, and they said no, it goes there, because if you tried to weave that in there, it wouldn't work. You have this flange here, and if you try to put this underneath all that, it just wouldn't work. So we'll have to address that, and same thing over here, get that pushed in and welded, and then roll these flanges back down to make that all look nice. These are welded, and I did that adjustment here, cut that loose, re-welded it, so that's all good to go. And of course the roof and everything is welded on. And there will be more on that later, you know, when it comes down to doing filler work and dressing all this up to make it look nice. As it is, there's a lot of grinding that I need to do. I mean, still have welds up here on the cowl, all over the place, and it's going to take some time to get all that taken care of. But I'm very happy to have everything sheet metal wise, you know, that needed to be welded on is on the car now, except for the core support, and that'll come later. But I will be addressing the front suspension pieces at some point as well. I don't know if it's going to be the next video or not. Right now, what I need to do is continue with my shuffling. As I mentioned, the Cobra Jet is going to be moved, and then my Mach 1 needs to go back in the paint booth area so that I can access the lift to get this up in the air. And then all of these pieces, of course, will become part of it. I think it's looking pretty good. Of course, there's still a lot to do, as we know. This car is going to need all kinds of parts installed into it at a future date, and I am working towards that goal. And of course, it's going to end up with the Coyote engine in it. So all of that will be covered in future videos. However, I want to point out, this next week, I won't be in here. I will be at SEMA. I have a friend who invites me to go to the SEMA events, and he has invited me again this year, and I'm able to make it happen. So I'm going to go out there. I'll be out there Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and come back on Saturday morning, I think. So about 3 days of hanging out at the SEMA show. So I have press credentials, and I'll be able to do editing or filming and post stuff as I can. Now, I don't know if I'll have a video ready to go next week or not, or if I will do some live streams and or some shorts, because there's always incredible things to see out there at SEMA. That's what's happening. I also have some other stuff going on with some other cars that I'm going to be, you know, getting into later, and I'll share that with you when I get to that point. But this is the end of this video. So as always, I want to thank my patrons who help me continue making these videos. They support me, help me pay the bills, and I appreciate them so much. If you're interested in becoming a patron, there is a link in the description box below. There's also links for tools and equipment and Amazon. Anything that I use in the shop that I endorse is going to be on my Amazon pages, and if you buy something from them, I get a little kickback. Just how it works. There is also a link for the Yes Welder DP200, and same thing, a little kickback from that. But that'll be it. So once again, thanks for watching, and until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya.